Right, what is going on, guys? Welcome back to another Tom Talks. Today I have another guest on. He's a special, very young man. He is a rugby coach, principal, you name it. It is Craig Mullan. Craig, tell us a bit about yourself, mate.
Okay, so you've summed it up quite nicely. Principal and rugby coach, father of three, product. Closer.
No, you're good.
Oh, okay. Product of father of three, product of the West Coast. So father was a coal miner. 5 years captured at boarding school down North Otago, and spent the rest of my time in Canterbury.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. Moved on up and became a principal and things like that. How did you initially get into the education system, things like that?
Actually, it's a funny you should say that, because it was a question Simone asked me this morning.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a good mate over from Hawaii. Him and I went for a ride this morning, and he said, why education for you? And for me, it was really about my mum. My mum was a school teacher, and I really enjoyed her sharing knowledge with us as kids. But as I got a bit older, it was actually seeing the finished product. I suppose that's why I got into coaching too. It's the fact that you can share your knowledge with somebody and watch them grow. Mm-hmm. And I got a big kick out of watching people develop and watching them as them grow. And that's probably why I got into the teaching side of it. Yeah. Beautiful.
And where did you start in terms of your first ever school you worked at, you might say, as a teacher or principal? Where was...
Okay, so I went, was at college for... I interrupted my time in college to go and play some rugby overseas.
Of course, yeah.
So, of course, I got back in the day before rugby was professional, I did a year and a half at Teachers College, and then I went and spent some time in Bradford in the north of England, which was entertaining. Then came back, and then my first job was at West Braden Primary School. I worked... I was there for 2 years, and then I moved to Greymouth and did 3 years teaching in Greymouth, then came back and worked in Christchurch at an intermediate school for a number of years, and then made my way out to mighty North Canterbury.
Beautiful. And you got into the education system largely for that, seeing the kids go to teenagers, and the teenagers developing into young adults and things like that, and then developing into adults and things like that. So
that's the big side of it. Mm-hmm. That's the big kick I get out of it. I've known you now for quite a few years, and that was through underage rugby and cricket. Yeah. And I was and how did I get into cricket? I got into cricket because I was a teacher, and teachers tend to end up being people who coach. Yeah. So that was where it's seeing the growth in people, and for example, Brad McKenzie, who's coaching with us this year at the high school. Brad was in my year 8 class when I first started teaching at Ashley. Yeah.
What year was that?
Oh God, it was a while ago.
Yeah.
It was late 90s. So.
Right.
Yeah, so far out's right. It just shows that I've been around forever. But Brad's now a dad, and he's got a couple of young boys, and that's the growth you see. You see young men and women developing into really good humans, and that's the cool thing about it.
That's the cool thing. Yeah. And why was it that you chose to be a principal, prefer to be a principal over a teacher, a year 8 teacher or things like that?
Actually, I didn't choose. What happened was, how could I describe this without sounding like quite a plonker? I got onto the board. I got a deputy principal's job out here, and I was working, and I had a class of 32 kids, and they were great kids, and I was having a great time, and it was really, really good. I got on really well with the community and with the kids themselves, and then I ended up getting on the board of trustees, and in my first board meeting, the principal announced that he was going to resign move on, and so it sort of gave me an opportunity to be in an acting principal's position. So I was in an acting position for 2 terms, and I actually liked it. Initially, I actually enjoyed it. I enjoyed the difference I could make. And then what happened was I applied for the position. I had to go through the whole process. I got shortlisted and then interviewed, and the fools, they gave me the job. So that's where it started, and that was a long time ago.
Definitely. What would you say, as a principal, being in the education system for a while, would be some of the biggest challenges that the education system has posing around, how the system works and things like that?
The system's changed. I've only known the whole Tomorrow's Schools era. So I came in to teaching when boards of trustees first started, and that's different to what it was. So I've known nothing else that way. The other thing, the thing that I've noticed the biggest change is the kids have stayed the same, maybe got a little bit more sophisticated, but the parenting's changed.
In what way?
Parenting's changed because now mums and dads, to actually make ends meet, both have to go to work. And right back at the start, even when I first started teaching, and that's 30 years now, mum stayed at home a lot more because they didn't have to be working to make ends meet.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And so you had that stable person at home, and the kids they just seemed to be better prepared for school.
Right,
they just seemed, and there wasn't the need, or I don't know, there might have been, I just probably didn't notice it because I was so young, but I didn't see the need or the drive to push your kids so hard.
And that's a more common thing now, wanting to, my son's got to be the top athlete and she's got to be the best music
student and all that sort of carry on. You see a lot more of that, Tom, and what I was listening to an interview the other day on the radio, top tennis coach who has been coaching for 30 plus years. And he was saying the same things about that. Once upon a time, he's a Swedish coach, so he's coached, the Bjorn Borgs and the Mats Verlanders of the world. And he was saying that once upon a time, mums and dads supplied the money to get kids into these academies. Yep. They provided the support, so the food and the roof over the head and all that sort of stuff. But that's where the buck stopped.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
But nowadays, mums and dads are showing up. They're pushing these kids to get them into academies, and then they are attending every practice.
Right. Okay.
And they're going to every tournament, and then they're questioning everything that the coach does, and that's what we're experiencing as teachers nowadays. Is that our parent body, because of technology, because of the readily available access to knowledge, they know more than we do.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And some do, and some don't. But they're quite prepared to say that this is what my child needs, and despite thinking about what's happening for all the other kids, it's all about my kid.
Yeah, well, every parent now knows the best and the most, don't they, in terms of their children and what they need in the sense of...
Yeah, I think but I think that if you work in a situation where you're dealing with kids all the time, you do develop a little bit of a talent about working with children, and you might know what's best. And you might disagree with some of the parenting styles, and you might disagree with the way some of the kids are being brought up. The term now, once upon a time, 10 years ago, it was helicopter parents.
Right. Okay.
So basically, where my kid was, I'm hovering over the top to make sure. Now it's lawnmower. So the parent gets in front and they plough a path for that kid, trying to make things easier for them. Yep. In education, we're told we now have to teach kids about resilience.
Right.
Okay. But mums and dads are creating a situation where kids aren't fail. Kids don't fail.
Right. Okay.
So you can't teach resilience if there's no failure. So it's changed a lot.
Definitely.
And the kids are still the reason I'm there, but I'm finding more and more not negativity, but more. I'm struggling with the input or the busybodiness or whatever you want to call it of parents.
Does some of that, you talked a lot about how when you were growing up, it was the drop your kid off, they choose how far they want to go, and now my generation, it's more I want my kid in the academy, I want my kid top of the class and things like that. Do you think some of that comes from an insecurity in the parent that they have from their previous failings, and now they just wanted to push their kid, like, this is the new me. Like this is what I would have done if I was a kid because I wasn't an All Black. Does some of that come from an insecurity? Or?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. We always want what's best for our kids. So I look at your mum and dad, and they want what's best for you, and that's really good. What I find now is that there is a lot of that. Living vicariously through my kid. So I didn't choose my pathway really well, so I'm going to really push and really promote. I also think too that we were taught when I was doing studies at university was that the only way you can go through a class structure is through your kids. So my dad jumped the class structure because he was a coal miner.
Yep, right.
Blue collar worker. I've never worked underground in my life and wouldn't intend to, and the reason, and he's jumped basically because he sent me away to school and sent me away to educate, all that stuff. Education was very important to him, even though he left school at 12. So similar sort of thing.
Yeah, I get you. Yep.
He didn't tick all the boxes as far as education goes, so he wanted us to do all that. So things have changed. I think things, and your point about I wasn't, I thought I was good enough, but I think I want my son to be an All Black, so I'm going to push really, really hard. And you've been there, you've been selected and not selected.
Definitely.
It's a tough one because at the end of the day, an All Black is just the opinion of maybe a group of people.
Definitely.
It's just one person's opinion. So there are parents push a lot harder nowadays than ever before.
Definitely. How do you, as a principal, even as a society, how do we fix this? I don't know if it's a problem, but the fact that we do have a problem around kids being forced to do more than perhaps what they even want, or parents, pushing the lawnmower instead of just hovering above. How do we fix that?
I think that what has happened, society as a whole has changed. We've become really more focused on our own little nuclear family. Yep. We don't, community is basically a rude word.
Right. Okay.
So we are very focused on what's happening under our roof. But I guarantee, even in the country now, we're not too concerned with what's happening with our neighbours.
Okay.
So I think that we've really got to try and get back to that. How we get back to that is really, really tough because we are fed a whole lot of information via media about things we should be scared of.
Right. Okay.
The dodgy neighbour who could be a perv. I don't let my kids bike to school anymore because of the traffic on the road. I'm scared someone's going to kidnap them.
Yep.
We seem to live in a society now where we are so focused on all the negative stuff, we forget about all the good stuff. And we are so focused on protection, we forget about building resilience.
Yep.
So how do we get back to it? I don't think we will.
Right, okay.
I don't think we will. I think there'll come a time, maybe going forward, maybe beyond yours and my time, where we'll say, shit, we should have stopped and taken a breath and got it right. Or maybe we can't take a breath because the world's underwater by that stage.
Definitely, yeah. Well, the cool thing there is we obviously focus on the negative a lot more and things like that, but the cool thing is that, like, if you're going to send little Johnny down the road to bike to school, it's likely he's going to meet, 2 or 3 other kids along the way who's probably going to be biking to school with his mum or something like that, and then you can establish that community, because then you're meeting your 2 neighbours that actually turn out to be down the road and they're not pedos, and they're a lovely family, and then you can build that community up, that sense of community.
We've lost trust. We've lost trust, and this also comes back to parents losing trust in teachers and and the education system.
Yep.
And I can understand why people have lost faith in the education system because it's been all over the place for the last couple of years. It seems to be if you've got a problem, the education system will solve it.
Right.
A child drowns in North Auckland. Well, we all have to put a sweing program in. There's an obese kid living in Invercargill. We all have to put in a healthy eating program.
Okay.
So. We're trying to solve everyone's problem all the time. It's quite sad. I think that there's some really good things happening with education that have been happening recently.
Cool.
But it's going to take a long time to fix it.
What are those? Obviously we talked about a few negative things. What are those positives that you're seeing as a principal in the education system?
I think we're getting away from testing kids from a young age, which is really good.
Cool. Yep.
Okay, so can you remember what your reading age was when you were a 5-year-old?
I can't remember what it was when I was 18.
Yeah, well, so who gives a shit?
No.
So there was the government put a lot of emphasis on making sure that we knew where the kids were at certain stages, and that where I am and what we're trying to do. And I think it's what lots of schools are trying to do now, is actually get away from that rigorous testing from an early age, and basically from years 1 to 3, let them learn to love learning. So we have a lot at the school I'm at. We have a lot of play-based learning. We have a lot of exploratory learning. And of course, play for some parents is a scary word.
Definitely.
So because it's not controlled and it's not
Fall out of a
measured
tree or something like that. And
Well, that's the other thing. Yeah, you fall out of a tree. Well, what do you learn? Well, you learn that your bones break and you get up and dust yourself off and carry on. So that's some really good stuff. I'm seeing a lot of that. Has been a drive of schools working together, so communities of schools.
Cool.
So we've got this really cool thing at the moment called a kahuiako, which is a community of schools working together, learning from each other, and developing a really cool pathway for kids. Now, it's not what is a problem. The problem really is the fact that we have in our kahuiako a big secondary school. You might know it, and it's not a problem. The thing is that we've got different systems. So secondary school is really focused on NCEA,
definitely,
and testing. Primary school is getting away from that and is developing a really, really cool way of developing the whole learner and making sure that kids are following the pathways that they want to follow and that they're interested in, and then they get to high school and maybe that's not offered as much.
Cool.
I know the high school, God bless them, are changing. I know that in years 9 and 10 now there's a change of focus and a change in the program, and that's really, really cool. But then from years 11, 12, 13 it's still all tertiary based, and it's based on the old system, which was where we want the elite go to university.
Definitely,
Okay.
Yeah, no, you can still see that, just recently being in the last 3 years sort of thing, and you can definitely still see that, I guess.
Well, the sad thing is, like I was speaking to a teacher at the high school, which is really cool. We've got a really good communication with them now, and it was all about he would like to one day be recognised the same, equal to the teachers of English, maths and science.
Okay,
He taught another subject, and I won't say this because it might give him away, but he taught another subject at the school, and he didn't consider to be equal to those traditional subjects.
Definitely.
Sad.
What was you talked a lot about the whole learner now in primary school, from years 1 to 8. What comes under, you've got the ability to be tested. What else comes under the whole learner sort of title?
Well, you're trying to develop a problem solver, a kid that's, we talk about resilience, a kid who is able to adapt for situations. You want a reader and you want a writer and you want someone who does maths, and that's cool. But kids develop at different speeds, and the system that we were playing with 3 or 4 years ago was all that by the end of this year they will all be here.
Right.
By the end of this year they will all be here, and if you didn't get them all there, you were failing.
Right. Okay.
In my experience, boys travel different pathways to girls educationally.
So different as well.
School is set up for girls. Because girls are wired differently, and this might come across as really sexist, and you might have all the feminists coming after you. But I believe that there are boys who are wired in the education system who will go along and get along with all teachers and do really, really well. But there are some boys who are not wired for education. They end up probably mostly in the first 15, and they learn differently.
Definitely.
And they will struggle. And then when you get in the situation that you guys were, have been in at secondary school, there is the physical presence of young men as well. Of course. Because you get bigger, you get hairier. And some teachers don't like the fact that they are losing control. So instead of teaching you or forming a relationship, they will become quite regimented with how they deliver the program to you. And that's not how some people learn.
Definitely. So it's taken into account the how we're different in the genders and catering to how women and males typically learn, in the sense that they do learn in different ways. And
and there are some males who will learn as well, if not better, than some of the females,
definitely.
and vice versa.
Yep.
It's like when I work with a group of young adults, coaching, I don't deliver. Well, you find out first of all, you build a relationship, and then you deliver your program differently for each one. So, for example, when I was coaching you, I knew that you had the capacity upstairs to take on board what I was saying, to ask questions, and to adapt. There are other rugby players who you've been involved with over the years who are not probably as academic and probably not as confident to talk and ask questions, and so therefore you have to establish another way of dealing with them.
Yeah, no, I want to get into that rugby. I'll just do the cameras.
Oh God.
Right. Yeah, cool. What we were talking about before was you're obviously an active member of the community, and you've been coaching the First 15, the Rangiora First 15 for...
This will be my fourth year.
Fourth year coming up now, so which is pretty insane. What was it that got you into wanting to coach that team specifically?
That team? I'll be honest, I'd worked a lot with Shane Fletcher over the years. Shane and I started off coaching the original Saracens senior side.
Yep.
So when Rangiora and Southbrook combined, it was not my first go at coaching. I'd done a bit in town with the Christchurch Rugby Club, but then... He got me involved with that. Then he got me also involved with North Canterbury.
Yep.
He had just made the step up to, I might have been Crusaders management, it might have been Mitre 10 management, I'm not sure, I can't remember.
Yep.
But I think he'd done a year with the First 15. And he said, look, opportunity, you think the way I do, you and I think the same way about developing the whole rugby player and not just... a sportsman. So have a crack at it.
Awesome.
So I did. I applied for the position and I got interviewed and I failed. I missed out. I got a phone call from Marty Ashbury, God bless him, just to let me know that I'd missed out on the position and all the best with my future going forward. And then 2 days later, a young man, a fella who I'd been yelling at across the fields for years, Mr. Dunseith, Glenn rang me and said, look, I understand you'd applied for the job and you'd missed out. And I said, I'm a bit gutted. Congratulations, Glenn, you've got the job. And he said, hey, how about you and I do it together? And that actually created quite an interesting friendship. So, because we'd spent years on opposite sides of the paddock, bloody Ahoka, yelling at each other and thinking rude things about each other, and I think that we both wanted what was best for rugby in North Canterbury.
That's awesome. And
so we came together, and I'm just looking at the number of drinks you've got on the wall that I may have partaken in. Sidestep. So we developed, I think, quite a good little team over the years, and our coaching team anyway. And
beautiful.
That's how I got into it.
You talked about developing the full young man in the rugby team, not just the skill part of him. Obviously, something that's been pretty awesome with Rangiora High School is the improvement in culture, but also performance over the last sort of 3-4 years. Considering where they started out, obviously build up over time and things like that. What was it that you felt you did possibly differently to improve that culture and then the performance that obviously came with it? Yeah,
it was interesting because the skill side of it, you can work on. You can develop your skills and you can develop the knowledge of the game. What I tried to focus on, and you might have noticed this, I wasn't, the first couple of years I wasn't really out front and did a lot of talking about this, that and the other, but I did go around the individuals and talk to all the individuals. And I saw that as my role in the first 2 years, was basically I was the assistant coach. I did a lot of man management. I worked a lot with the individuals. I spoke a lot to the players I thought who weren't offering as much and we needed to get more out of, and had a lot of one-on-one conversations. And that's where I think I added to it. Then Glenn last year stepped back as head coach and said, look, you need to... And so that became a bit different. I then started analysing the video a lot more and looking at the skills and could tweak my game, but still... I still believe the relationship side of things is really important. And I try and establish those relationships. I mean, we've already had this year, on the back of the feedback from the players from last year, we've already had a barbecue at my place where the returning players who could make it are coming back, and I've been told this doesn't guarantee a starting position or a position, but this is what we want to establish for the year. And we had a chat about setting the standards. We talked about how we fell down last year respect-wise. And we talked about being... the focus for the year is about being a good bastard both sides of the road.
Both sides? What do you mean?
Well, I don't know if you know the establishment at Rangiora High School, Tom, but there's a road that runs between the playing field.
I see what you're saying now. Yep.
Yeah, between the playing field and the sports field.
Yep.
The school itself. And last year we had a lot of players. We would have had 6 or 7 players last year, and unfortunately some were senior players who dropped the ball as far as respect for the people on the academic side of the road.
Definitely, okay.
And so, and I think that's where we fell down. I think, God bless, Calvin Eder. He has established that rugby club over the last, I don't know how many, it must be 10 years now. Yeah. Got them into the Press Cup, as it was called. And he really wants the team to develop a reputation, or rugby to develop a reputation where they're good guys.
Yep.
So we're sponsored by Isuzu, which is handy.
Yep.
And there's an Isuzu ad that talks about, such and such is a good bastard, because he's trading in his Isuzu. And I just happened to be talking with one of the players who lives under my roof, and he said, that's actually a good idea. We can be good bastards both sides of the road.
Yep.
So we talked about that, and myself and Ben Prain sat down with the guys the other day, and we just chatted around what does a good bastard look like. Yeah.
Awesome.
So for me, it's that whole, and of course it used to be back in your first year, it was we were goon on 3.
Definitely,
gone.
Yeah. I dislike that a lot.
So that's gone. And it's now the values of the school. Mm-hmm. So we use the values of the school. That was something I slipped under the radar no one knew about. So little things like that. So it's trying to develop a young man who not only could develop a pathway professionally rugby-wise, you don't have to go and play for the Crusaders. Yep. You could take your skills overseas and play, second, third, fourth division overseas and still do okay. Mm-hmm. But it's about developing a really good young man who is respectful, who aspires to be better than he really is, and who contributes to his community.
Awesome.
Do you like how I used the school values then?
Yeah, that was very impressive. Very impressive.
I remember that.
Rangiora High School community values, school values.
Yeah.
You've been there for 4 years now. Obviously you've had different placings and things like that on the ladder, but what is it that you're most proud of? Would it be the placings that have on the average have improved, or is it that more cultural values?
It's actually a combination. I mean, when you get into coaching and you get success, that's a really, really good pat on the back. I mean, it's not only success for the players who take all the accolades, but it's also success for you that you've put a few things in place and have actually worked. Yep. So going to the top 4, what was it? It was your last year.
Yep.
It was 2 years ago now.
2018.
Yeah.
Oh, quick. Yeah.
That was massive. I mean, we had no show. We were on the back of, we had to beat Boys High to actually have a chance. We'd never done it as a school or a rugby team, and we did it. And I think that and then we got a couple of good wins, and then we managed to get away and get up there and perform bloody well up there as well. To get a televised game. Oh yeah. And to play that final of the co-ed championship was outstanding. The year after, so we had I had that establishment year with the boys, and then we developed a couple of academy players, or Crusader Academy players. We were starting to be seen more often. We got interviewed by the media. I don't if you remember your offsider who shared a position with you in the front row.
Yes,
gave away tactics. And it was stuff like that. All of a sudden we were exposed to the world, and we weren't prepared how to deal with that. So we learned from that, and we had a session at the start of last year where it was about, if you are talking to the media, this is what you need to know. And it was stuff that Rangiora had never had to deal with before. So then last year, when Sky TV showed up to interview the boys before the Boys High game, whole new world. So so the success is great. Finishing 5th last year was good. and I've apologised to the boys because one of the meet things came up. I focused too heavily on getting back to the top 4.
Definitely.
The guys who had returned and had done it really wanted to do it again. But instead of taking one game at a time, we focused on that end goal.
Right, okay. Yep.
And I think that's where we fell down. And when that line when a pencil line went through that as one of our goals, we couldn't do it. We started to look for other things to blame. We blamed the rules, and we blamed this, and we blamed that, and we were set up, and we forgot to actually internalise it and actually make it all about us. And so we've learned from that. And I noticed a couple of those senior players who I've mentioned before, they shut down as soon as we knew we weren't going to go.
Yeah. That's interesting.
So their play dropped away completely because what's the point?
Absolutely, yes.
So I suppose, I talk a lot, don't I, Tom?
It's good. It's good.
Growth.
Great content.
Growth of the individual is really important. But, the individuals will grow on the back of success and also on the back of failure. I think, that first year, establishing myself as a coach with that first group, and I think, you were involved in that first year. We learned a lot that year too. And we learned a lot about each other as players and also coaching team, but also we learnt just how far we could probably go if we worked a bit harder. So that was good.
No, it's awesome.
And great to see one of the products of that year, Fletcher Newell, age group player of the year.
Fantastic, man. Yeah, no,
so that was,
awesome.
And I know Fletcher's done all the hard yards, but you'd like to go, yep, he was in that team and he was part of Rangiora High School, and hey, start to look at what we're doing.
Yep.
And we still, I still think we struggle with that. I still think we struggle with the fact that we are not one of the established schools. Right. So we do have a bit of a chip on our shoulder when it comes to dealing with the academies and the talent identification. Okay. And it is interesting. So we keep doing what we're doing. Yep. And that's one of the players from this year came away and said to me, he said, I went to that Crusader Knights thing. They've said that that we know for the number of players that go through a boys' high, we know that they're going to have good talent.
Yep.
So how is it that Rangiora can get to where they are every year over the last couple of years? And they said, that comes back to good coaching. And I think, a bit of a pat on the back. Definitely. So I'll take that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah, what is the... obviously, Rangiora High School is not seen as one of the top rugby schools and things like that. As a coach or a member of the Rangiora community, would you prefer to see Rangiora High School rugby recognised as a top rugby school, or just the underdogs that perform all the time?
Good question. I hate when people say, you battled really well after we've lost. Yep. Good old Rangiora, we knew you were going to put up a good fight. Yep. And it's a bit, that's like pouring vinegar into your wine glass. I like the fact that we are now watched very closely. Mm-hmm. I like the fact now that we punch. We do punch above our weight. Why do we punch above our weight? Because we've really focused on skills, and we spend a lot of time on skill drills and catch pass and all that sort of stuff. So if we continue to do that, we will develop players who can foot it against. Yep. And we had 40 boys show up for the trial last year. Yep. And still finish 5th on the table. Boys high get 600 to choose from.
Yeah.
So it's different. It's chalk and cheese. My own son came to me a long time ago now and said he wanted to go to St. Bede's.
Yep. Okay.
And I said, why? Mm-hmm. He said, well, we've got the whole Catholic background thing. I said, yeah, but why do you want to go to St. Bede's? You've never been to a Catholic church in your life. And he said, for the rugby.
Right, okay.
And I went, okay. So that's where it all started, about trying to make, and this on the back of conversations with Shane, because his boy was only 4th form, year 10.
Yep.
And things were starting to happen there. So we had this conversation about, why aren't we trying to grow? Why are we losing so many players to town? Why aren't we trying to grow rugby in North Canterbury? And when you even look at that boys' high side that we played against last year, I think there were 4 or 5 boys who were all from out here, Canterbury Country boys. And it's like anything. We seem to be the opposite to the cricket. Canterbury Country cricket, basically is a great pathway to getting into the Canterbury cricket
okay.
side.
That's interesting. Yeah.
Whereas the rugby, you have to be in. Apparently, you have to be in town to play.
Very
So
interesting. Yeah.
I like the fact that we do punch above our weight.
Yep.
I've always, being son of a coal miner, I like to be a bit of a battler. But I really, I believe that what Rangiora, with the numbers and the amazing sporting talent they've got, they should also be putting as much effort into the academic side of it as they are in the sporting side of it.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
When you look at that school and you have probably a better relationship with some of the students than I have, you see Tegan Bishop, surf champ.
Yeah, man.
You see the Macy Frasers and the Gabby Rennies of the world. You see the Jack Exeters, the basketball players. There are football players. There are hockey players. There are averagely good cricket players, good rugby players. The school is turning out some fantastic sports people.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it seems to be off their own back, or not under the, or maybe under the umbrella of the school. But who's coaching those people? It's not school teachers. It's not the teachers from the school, and so the people like Calvinita, they're a dying breed because they are being told you need to focus so much time on your academic side of it,
of course.
that community side of it, the sporting community side of it, the other pathways are being neglected. And that's not just at Rangiora High School. If you look around all the high schools around the country, a lot of their coaches are paid.
Yeah, of course.
And we ran into that up in the North Island.
Yeah.
They have specialist rugby coaches who are paid to do that job. They don't have the volunteers because, once again, life's too busy. And once again, mums and dads are earning money to...
Yeah, it's different, isn't it? Absolutely.
Yeah, so I had a conversation with someone recently who's just been appointed to a new coaching position. It's a well-known coaching position, and I asked that person where they were going to look at dropping their other coaching job that they were doing, and what the so-called amateur job actually does. He does better at that financially than he does at the new one. So,
of course.
So it just depends on what school you're at.
Yep, definitely. Yeah, something I wanted to talk to you about is basically this podcast. You've proven over the years to be a huge community man and things like that, but you talk about it's almost a dying breed and things like that. What is it for you? Like, why are you so involved in a community? You're a principal of a large primary school in the North Canterbury district. You're a coach of probably one of the most looked upon teams in North Canterbury. Why are you so involved in this community? What is it for you? Something?
Oh, okay. So what is it for me? It's really not about me. I do get a kick out of giving back, which is what we were brought up.
Definitely.
Yeah. So when we were kids, and you can talk to your mum and dad about it too. It's about the old JFK. Ask not what you can do for you, or not what the country can do for you, but what you can do for your country. So we were all brought up to say that once upon a time, when your time in the saddle is finished, then you coach someone else or teach someone else or give something back. And I've got a lot out of rugby over the years. I've travelled around the world on the back of rugby. I've met some fantastic people on the back of rugby. I've probably had far too many hangovers because of rugby, but
of course.
But you meet some great people and you meet a mixture of people, and that's one of the things I love about rugby in New Zealand is the fact that you can be playing rugby with a plumber or a lawyer. You can be playing rugby with someone who's unemployed or is an airline pilot. It doesn't make a difference. Whereas when I played in England, the class structure of the rugby over there's changed, but when I was over there, it was very, doctors, lawyers, professionals.
And you get to influence what by now would be thousands, you'd say tens of thousands of children like that. You've got them all going through your school and now coaching Ashley Rugby Club at junior level and then moving into Rangiora High School. That's got to be pretty rewarding in the sense of seeing people, you've now got the guy that on your first year you were teaching with is now coaching with you and things like that. Like, that's got to be pretty rewarding, being able to call on a guy and say, hey mate, I want a hand to coach a team, and you've turned out to be a pretty damn good guy, come along and help out. Sort of
well, and the same with you, mate, when, I think that you sort of rang you and spoke to you after I heard about the injury, and then the reason is because I know that you're a straight up joker and you are the sort of guy who wants to give back, and I look at the way you were brought up and I look at the way Brad's been brought up, and I look at and that's the difference. You the people who care are normally the ones who give back constantly.
Definitely.
So you sit down and you'll probably get invited to a rugby committee meeting, and you sit down at that rugby committee meeting and you look around the table, and it's all the same people.
Right, okay. Yep.
It's the people who are involved in the cricket. It's the people who are involved in the rugby. It's the people who have kids in the team.
Yep.
It's the people who supply the food. It's the same people time and time again. Now, you always get that, but unfortunately, it's a narrowing group.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, Matt Richardson, God bless him, has been on our rugby committee since I started. Ewan left your year. Matt stayed on for another year.
Yeah.
Shane Fletcher still attending these meetings.
He's still there, is he? Even after Gussie's gone. Is he still there this year?
He will be involved. He is my technical analyst.
Yep.
And it's great having that connection with the Crusaders and Shane there.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And,
The knowledge.
A lot of knowledge. And I just think that that's to me is community.
Yeah, I love
It's
it.
about those people who will give back, and so hopefully this year, I know Matt's standing down, Glenn's standing down. Kelvin has said that he's no longer going to be teacher in charge of rugby.
Yep.
We need fresh blood. We need people
Definitely.
to come on board, and it's for those things like the fundraisers and organising all that stuff.
Of course, yeah.
But when at the moment you've got 4 guys involved who are coaching as well. So we're not only being involved on the committee, we're also coaching. And it's become a family thing because there's Mr. and Mrs. Prainer on the committee, and Mr. and Mrs. Mullan are on the committee as well. So it's become a family thing as well. Yeah, so those, we were taught to give back. And we were brought up to give back, and I think that's what you're seeing. All these, I think all these people with really good salt of the earth values are the ones who are on your committees, who are giving back, who are standing back, letting teachers do their jobs, who are standing back, letting coaches do their jobs. They're the people who, if they do have a problem, will deal with it in a way that is mature, sensible. They'll have a quiet word to you afterwards, and if they disagree with you, they'll say, "Oh, okay, fair enough, you're in charge," and they'll walk. I don't agree with you, but they'll walk away. Whereas nowadays, people will argue with you until they get their own way, and if they don't get their own way, they'll move schools, or they'll move rugby teams, or they'll move schools, or they'll
all the same thing. No, that's the thing I thought was cool about starting to give back, and been like 2 sessions now, things like that with the rugby team. It was like you're very grateful for what the high school gives you when you're growing up. You go through the 5 years, and you're obviously grateful for the academic things, but I guarantee what has shaped me and every other person that's gone through school, any school, but Ranger High School in particular, is not sitting there and doing a test, but it's the people you meet, the games you play at lunchtime, the sport teams you play for. You meet lifetime friends, playing the summer fest and the winter fest, doing the school choir, like all that stuff I think is equally important, if not more important, in the development of young people. Our days, like, you can sit there and do your test and have a nice certificate and things like that, but if you can't socialise with people, you can't problem solve, which you get through playing rugby and doing music and things like that. Like, I think it's equally important, and that's why it's like cool to give back.
Yeah, it really is, and I think that when my last year at high school was I was a bumpy year. I loved it. I was talking about with James the other day, and it just we went to the top 4. We had the best cricket team. We were playing senior cricket. We were having a great time. Life was good. I wasn't too focused on the academic side of it, but I managed to pick my way through and get what I wanted. So when I walked out the other end, I could be a teacher, which is what I wanted to do. That period when I walked away from high school was a really, really depressive period. Because I'd been the big fish in the pond and all that sort of care. So I think that transition period is also something that I think that we can develop through rugby. Giving young men the confidence, and young women, because we've got a very good girls team as well, but young men and women the confidence that when they walk out of high school, which has basically been protecting them for 5 years, you walk out and you go, right, I'm prepared. I can handle myself. I can actually. It's like when we do all that stuff. When we're at training, we train for the worst possible case scenario. We'll drag a guy off the field and say you're down to 13 or 12 players now. You've sin bin. Right, deal with that. That's what school should do more of. Prepare you for what's actually going to happen once you leave school, because a lot of schools go, righto, I've done my bit, wipe my hands of you and move on.
Yeah, I get that. I think being fresh out of school a year now, but when you notice when you leave, you have certain people in amongst that year 13 group that hold the special awards. They're the rugby captain, or they're the head student. They're all those people, and then you leave and school has told you, especially that last year being the big fish, that you are the most important creature on the earth, because you are leaders, but then you leave and also it's like, I'm not important at all, and you get told you are, which is it's a massive problem, because I think a lot of kids get that false sense that as soon as they're going to leave school, they're going to be the Prime Minister, or they're going to be the most important person still in the world, because they were in that community, and you leave and you're completely no one.
I had that conversation with a family member of mine that she, which narrows it down to 50%. She wanted to, as soon as she got a job, she wanted to be on $80,000 a year, and I said, seriously, you want to be on $80,000 a year? I think that is also to do with not societal expectations, but because we have developed we are
entitlement.
It's a funny one, Tom, because we're trying to protect the whole time. Even school teachers, like I'm probably not your atypical school teacher, and I'm quite proud of that. But a lot of school teachers, a lot of school systems will give out rewards, will make you, participation certificates for getting 12th. And then you go into high school and there's a pass-fail thing, but really, is there? Because I know, and from my family, one of my members of my family got NCA level 2 without having to sit a test. And then when the test came around, so what's the point? What's the incentive? You looked after, you cradled, you babied, and then all of a sudden you hit the real world. And I remember walking out of high school, and I wasn't ready for my first year.
No, hell no.
And I failed. I failed life. I went into a big black hole, and it was probably, depression or something along those lines. I spent more time trying to be happy and make up for it by partying really hard. But that first period away from school was a friggin' nightmare. And looking back now, that was one of the things. I really want high schools, primary schools to actually start rewarding the real stuff. We've set up, we're not into giving out stickers, and at our school we really want to develop intrinsic motivation. I want to be good because I want to be good, not because I'm going to get a reward at the end of it.
I love it.
We still have a bloody prize giving at the end of the year, which annoys me, but that's okay. Parents want that.
Of course.
But then, of course, at the end of this prize giving, we had a family ring up and complain about the fact that the wrong child they felt got the Year 7 Sports Award because their child had performed so brilliantly in this sport. And I said, well, we gave it for the breadth of sport that the other kid was involved with. No, you want... So that's another thing you have to deal with.
Yeah, it's tricky, isn't it?
Yeah.
Very tricky. I got some rapid fire questions for you.
Okay, right.
Get into it. What would you say the biggest positive about my generation, 25 to 16? What is the biggest positive thing they've got going for them?
You can fix my DVD. I know. I think that you guys have greater opportunities than what we had. I think you've got a wealth of information that's readily available to you, and I think that the group coming through right now and looking at my kids, because they fit in that group you're talking about, just the opportunities are so much bigger than they've ever have been before.
Definitely. And then I would say, to add on to that, what would be the biggest challenge, not negative, but the biggest challenge that we face as that same generation?
Well, you and I have talked about it. It's entitlement. It's actually believing that you don't have to work hard for something. It's the fact that I just expect. So, I want to come out of high school and get into an $80,000 paid job straight away. So I think that, as I said, that's it. Entitlement and just not having the resilience to deal with the crap you're going to be throwing.
Favourite rugby player for you growing up and favourite rugby player for you now?
Oh, right, okay. Growing up, let's have a think about that, because I was a forward and always wanted to be a back. So my favourite player growing up, 1978, I remember watching the first test with Graham Murray, was a bit of a legend for me. He was a well-spoken, wasn't the most athletic, wasn't the fastest in the team, but was a great leader. And then when he stood down at 81, said he didn't want to play the Springboks because of apartheid, I thought, you've gone up in my estimation. So that was really cool. Nowadays, the greatest player at the moment, I have to look. I'll go back. He's retired now, but Richie McCaw for me epitomises just being a good bastard.
Yep.
He high work ethic, high work rate, high pain threshold. But going from what he experienced in 2007 to double World Cup, changing the attitude and changing the culture of an established culture. Obviously showed the guys mana, and I really admire him for what he's done.
Definitely. And my last question would have to be, if you could make a rule for the day that everybody had to follow, what would it be?
I was reading about something today. Just be nice. Don't there's so much bloody negativity and hate in the world at the moment that do something nice for somebody every day. And that would be just there's just so much hurt in the world. So if we could do maybe 5 or 6 acts of kindness a day, that would be my rule.
Awesome. No, that's fantastic. I love it. I'm thinking about wrapping up. Do you have anything you want to add on? Anything you want to talk about?
No. I think it's really cool. Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on. I love getting people on and things like that. So we will wrap up. What I'll say is, thank you guys all for listening. Very, very good of you. Listening, watching, whatever you're doing. Huge thank you to Craig for coming on. I actually have some Coronas in the fridge for you. I need to give you. Message Molly Kane and said, what does he like to drink? And then just remember that this podcast, I set it up for basically you guys. If you want to come on and talk about anything you're educated in, experienced in, interested in, come on. This is your platform, and I'm just here to narrate it. So thank you very much for listening, and then have a fantastic day, and cheers, guys. Wicked.